We have some interesting news today, so I'd like to go ahead and get started. Rao, are you ready with the technical update?
Yeah, I am. Welcome to Community Update 197. So mainnet-wise, everything remains the same as last week, so I'm going to skip over that section. In terms of the code-based work, basically what the team is doing is the LLVM testnet has been heavily tested, and especially I want to thank the community. A few members in the community have also chipped in to start some testing. So we have some testing going on the leaderless block merge testnet. And the team themselves, especially Will and Gurinder, also have been testing it in addition to NutZipper. And NutZipper is basically collecting all these reports from all different sources and is trying to fix them and make any code adjustments as he goes through that. So that's what is going on the LLVM. So please do continue to test the LLVM testnet. We need all the testing we can get because this is a substantial change to the code base. So we want to make sure we catch everything that we can possibly catch before it goes to the mainnet. So that's what is going on. And in terms of the code base reorganization, what the team has been doing is there is the hard fork 2 branch onto which the changes from LLVM testnet branch are being migrated over, as well as the current dev branch is being migrated over to HF2. Will has completed that work for the most part and resolved the conflicts there. And he's now testing on that branch also to see and resolving any issues with the tests. So that's what's going on. Now, once all the changes are done and all the code changes are migrated over from the LLVM testnet to HF2, there is still going to be some more work to be done with the tests on the HF2, because basically the HF2 branch is the one that we are going to promote as the next level or next version of leaderless block merge. And then hopefully that would be the first one that would go on to the mainnet after living on the LLVM testnet for a while. So that's the state of affairs with the main state of affairs with the code base. As part of that, Tomislav is implementing the DAG manager. You can look at it in this pull request 3528. And what that is as the team is bringing all these things together, they're trying to make Casper and the DAG store and how the rest of the state interacts with the DAG store and all of that fairly modular. That has two benefits. Of course, it makes debugging easier in case of any issues, but it also makes the future development easier because people can work in multiple streams, knowing that the interfaces are defined between the different modules or subsystems, and that the internal changes that they do in a particular module should not necessarily impact anything else anywhere else. So that kind of work is also going on from a refactoring standpoint. And this also is important because when Stanislav comes on board next week, one of the things he's going to look at is improvements to the API and the developer experience with the system. And for doing that, this separation is very helpful to do that, for him to successfully do that. Stanislav's code that he was working on to find block hash by a truncated string, he's resolving some edge cases there. For example, if the string is of an odd length, how do you go about that? There's a new PR that he's working on for that. But I expect that his work on this will be complete relatively soon. And that actually can go on the mainnet independent of the LLBM, independent of the leaderless block merge, as well as Will has had a transaction balance script, the new transaction balance script that could work on any network. That is merged now. So those couple things I think can go, probably will do a minor release or 12.4 or something like that between now and the LLBM with those things. Dennis is making good progress on his storage and performance optimizations. Without any full integration into the code base, he's got some 20x kind of an improvement. Exactly how much improvement we'll get after we merge that in the full code base, we will see. I think Dennis and Tomislav have been working together on this, and they will have a presentation next week with some graphs and perhaps some review of what they've done. So that's proceeding well. And we expect that that will be integrated into the hard fork 2 branch soon. So that's the other piece there. And I mentioned last week that the tuple space mismatch error is gone, but now we had a cost mismatch error that we discovered last week. There is a preliminary fix for that, and it's being tested to see if that completely eliminates the problem or if there are still other cases we need to look into for that. So that's one of the things that NetZipper is working on. I know there has been some complaints in the community that we haven't had a tech governance meeting to prioritize what features to be worked on in terms of our chips. I think Dan was complaining about that, and that is true, that we haven't had a tech governance meeting in a while, mostly because the team had been really focused on the LLBM work and getting it out and resolving the issues. And then, of course, there was some off time also in between. But the intention is to soon have a tech governance meeting, maybe not this week necessarily, but at least next week. And we'll see if it makes sense to have one this week. But I really don't want to pull the team away from what they're doing to discuss the priority things. But it does become important when Stanislav comes on board. One of the things he is going to be looking at is the reviewing the plans and priorities for improving the developer experience. Certainly, we would like community feedback on that. And then when we do that, we'll also look at other RChip proposals that are already there and see what needs to be done. But at this time, the team just didn't have the bandwidth to take on any of the new RChip proposals. So we will get together, however, to review that. So that is the general scope of things. I do want to click on this link here for the hard fork 2 candidate fixes. The team has looked at what all needs to be done and then separated it out into required and optional. As you can see, one of this is the Golang 1.1. That is, the core work for that has been done. I'm not sure that the tests are in there completely or not. And there are a few other things that we were originally thinking that we may need it in the hard fork 2, but recent analysis basically says these are the things we need to complete. As you can see, many of these are done. There are a couple of items there that need to be done. And this is in addition to completing the leaderless block merge work. So all of this together will then go into the hard fork 2 release. That's the plan right now. And probably some of these, whatever we're saying are optional here, they'll probably go into hard fork 3 unless the team schedule works out whereby somebody has some time while one person is working on one problem, and if that's taking a little bit longer, perhaps another person can knock these off and then include them. So that's what we're going to do, because each of these, it's not just doing the task, but there is a corresponding testing, writing tests, and then executing the tests and all of that needs to be done. So with that view, I think we're making good progress towards getting ready for Hartford too. So that, I think, is my overall report. Are there any questions, comments?
Yeah, I just want to say that if people are, motivated to get these art chips, some resources, nothing prevents community members from working on them. The code is open source. At any time, if someone feels like an art chip is languishing because it doesn't have any resources, they are always free to go and develop.
Yeah, I think there's one more thing over there. I think even the RDev folks are getting geared up. I don't know if is Jim here. I don't know if you want to say anything, but he was saying that they could probably take on some tasks and or put some rewards on some of these things to move things along. I see Jim is there.
Yeah, we're currently managing a couple of wallets of community-funded activities. The new RChain wallet.com, which is an improved wallet, is community-funded. And we're going to be putting up a web page where people can contribute to activities, and I think the members will be willing to make some contribution to things they want, and we have it right now. We're doing it mostly manually, although we do have a crowdfund contract that's been tested minimally, and we'll be integrating with the RGov system. The RChain developer cooperation, is a leaderless organization without any. It doesn't have any legal entity associated with it. Everybody brings their own company or themselves, and we cooperate on standards for and tools that. And everyone's included. I mean, we have a dozen or so people that have said they're interested, or any developer that can is part of it just by virtue of being a developer or product manager, or it's an incubator for applications as well, and we run the work studies, etc., and help each other is the idea. Focusing on cooperative work as opposed to individual achievement, but we have people working on independent projects also.
Fantastic. Exactly. So there sounds like there's some support and some infrastructure, so that if the community feels like something is not getting needs, it could get some attention. Right.
I mean, we're looking at doing an RChain boot camp. It could become a co-op project at some point, but right now it would be community funded. And for that purpose, I did a RChain crash course, a Rolang crash course video, which we have a educator on board who's hopefully going to edit that down and add material to make it a crash course. And the idea of the boot camp would be each day would focus on one thing in detail, with maybe some videos and then hands-on work, and each day would be a different topic that would be covered deeply. and we're also putting together a design and architecture review group, so that people that want help designing RChain applications or want their design reviewed can bring it to a team of people. And for each job it could be a different team, but we basically get the people that are strong in those areas to collectively review things, as opposed to an individual. We hope to get a collective intelligence by having several people involved in each review or design process.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, so we have a few other things to chat about. I'd like to review some important decisions that the board made. And the top of that is that I'm very proud to announce that the board voted to convert both of our wholly owned subsidiaries, affectionately known as RPI and Dazzle, to LCAs. So they've also directed the executive to come up with a draft of the bylaws by next week, which is a tall order, but working on it. Any questions about that decision?
I was wondering, if these are going to be cooperative associations, who are going to be the members of the cooperatives?
That's a very good question. And we're exploring the bylaws to look at various scenarios, where some of them include where all of the RChain members become members of these cooperatives by default, or that the RChain co-op becomes a joint member, and thereby RChain members, make up part of the roles with respect to the organizations. But we have to look at each of these different arrangements and think through the consequences. At least with respect to RPI, we're also engaged with several different artists who have expressed interest in NFTs. So we would love to invite them to become members of RPI. Any other questions? Okay. Daryl, do you want that? Well, I should, before I hand it over to Daryl, I should mention there were some other board decisions, but I will talk about those in the closed door session. And we also have some good news with respect to our fundraising activities. So also talk about that in the closed door session. I'm excited that Evan Jensen has joined in an advisory capacity and was quite instrumental in helping the board come to an informed decision when they voted for the LCAs. So that was very nice. Unless there are any other questions about that, I will turn it over to Daryl for the weekend review.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, I would just concur. I don't know if would have been able to come to a decision if it wasn't for Evan's contribution. That was definitely helpful for me. I'll say that. Okay, so here's the weekend review for October 29th to November 10th. On Thursday, the governance committee It was quite an active call. We first spoke of Gary and his obituary and sending Rev to his family. And I was thinking, Jim, if you wouldn't mind, could you just kind of refresh that post on the members channel so that if anyone wants to send Rev or contribute to his obituary, they'd kind of have easy access to those links?
Will do.
Awesome. We also discussed investor feeder firms and the kind of concern around how the messaging is happening. We discussed the LCA limited cooperative structure, and the practice of what we just did, shifting the subsidiaries. And we also discussed RDev Rolang Bootcamp, which Jim just talked about, and Jim's work with at Brightman 11 on a prototype for Rolang crash course. In the work study on Thursday, Rolang debugging of chat and recorded review of Rolang crash course. On Friday in the climate coordination RCast, we talked about climate anxiety, COP26, organizing locally, and a new social network called the Liberty Project. On Saturday in the RGov Smart Contract Call, RDev Cooperation Planning Project, Sponsorship, and Team Formation. On Monday, Casper's Stand Up. It covered a logic for Q categories. In the RDev Member Co-op Planning, Cooperation at Scale Discussion and RDev Business. On Tuesday, in the Communications Working Group, we discussed best practices for working with Edify, some discussion around changing the front page of the RChain.coop website. Ian brought up the fact that the Epic is coming, and Steve Henley discussed being at the Climate Adaptation Center on the 19th. Lots of stuff this week. Also on Tuesday, the DApp Developer Work Study Log, there was an RGov walkthrough, RDev website team formation, and Rolang tutorial. And this morning in the active member hangout, we gave personal updates on the past week. Jim gave us an update on his health and showed us some 2D interactive collaborative meeting software called Gather.town that he is experiencing with the Team Human community. Steve Henley asked about reach.sh, blockchain development platform, to see whether people thought it made sense to engage. And Jim talked about the projects that he's been working on that he just briefed us about. And that brings us to now.
Thank you, Daryl. That's awesome. Any questions for Daryl? All right. I do want to mention that tomorrow I will be giving a keynote to the Foresight Institute, and I can paste the link to the chat in the RChain members channel if people are interested. I will be opening the curtain a little bit wider with respect to how I'm thinking about the computational model and the relationship between between Rolang, the row calculus, and OSLF. So I think in many discussions I've talked about how OSLF gives us unprecedented query power. We can also use it in a different way, which is programming collectively. So a lot of what's going to happen in the future of programming is programming large ensembles, and you want to be able to tell these large ensembles the sort of configuration that you want them to be in, as opposed to how to get there. So you need to be able to tell these large ensembles what rather than how. Most programming today is all about how. this process sends this message to that process, and that process responds by sending 3 messages to 3 different processes and waiting for one of them to get back to it, and so on and so forth. So that kind of how based or concurrent but still procedural model works, when we're talking about tens to maybe thousands of processes. But when you're talking about millions to trillions of processes, like the number of molecules in a beaker or the number of cells in a given organism, you can't program like that. You have to program in a different way, where you talk about what you would like this ensemble of agents to do. And OSLF provides a programming model for the moving from an concurrent but still imperative model to a concurrent and declarative model of programming. So I'll talk about that in the context of computational agency and what that means for the blockchain. So if that's your cup of tea, if that's interesting to you, please feel free to come to the Foresight Institute a keynote. Also, Atticbee and I will be headed down to San Francisco to participate in the Foresight Institute's Vision Weekend. And the RChain has a speaking slot for that. So make sure to pass along whatever media recordings and the like come out of that participation as well. Any questions about that? Okay. If people are interested, I would check out Atticbee's recent AMA to the ZB community. He gave an interesting talk on how RChain solves the trilemma. So take a look at that. It's certainly worth looking at. We have lots of tweets about that up in the Twitterverse. So take a look at that.
Do you know what your keynote to the Foresight Institute might be about, the subject?
Yeah, I just spoke about that, but the title is what happens.
I know you said the stuff about OSLF, but that's what you said you're going to present when you go down there. That's what you're saying?
No, the keynote is tomorrow. The speaking slot at the Vision Weekend is it's not called a keynote.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No worries. Anyway, so please check out Atticbee's talk. That's a lot of fun and worth your time and attention. I think that's all we've got for the community debrief. Again, we have a lot of interesting and fun news for the closed door session, but I think that's it. Any questions, comments, concerns from the community? This is your time as much as it is, the staff's time to talk to you.
Yes, can I just show for 1 or 2 minutes the tips web app that has been deployed last Friday?
Yes, please.
Cool. So yeah, previously it was an application running on dappy, and some people asked that it should be available in the browser. So right now it's hosted behind the dappy.tech website. So it's dappy.tech/tips. So it's a very simple crowdfunding web application that uses RChain and that uses MetaMask to sign transactions. So it's very straightforward. You have you can do three things. The first one is to create a tip board. So you input a title, a description, and it's not directly rev that you're going to raise. You're going to create tokens, and you're going to set a price to each one of them. So you can, for example, create just 10 tokens, and the price could be 10 rev each, and you're going to raise 100 revs. So you can do it any way you want. And so yeah, it's very straightforward. The first step is to set up your box. So it's all on the testnet right now. It's not a mainnet web application. And once you have created a box, you will have a contract ID, and you will be able to access a web page like this one. So this is, so for example, this is a contract ID, and you can click participate, and you will be taken to a new address. And this is Shixie's crowdfunding. So I'll just show the participation. So it's okay, a bit slow. So yeah, she created a crowdfunding, help me buy a book. And this is the description. And right now, only 14% of the tokens have been sold. So maybe I'll purchase like one. And you can put your name, and this is saved as a metadata associated to the fungible tokens. So I'll be like Jack. And then you tip, and this is where MetaMask comes in. You have to sign the transaction with a proper account. And it is also linked to a RChain token box. So, but it should be easy to set up. So please feel free to, to play with it, to create as many crowdfunding as possible. And this is running on the, the block merge testnet, not the LLVM, but when the LLVM is live, we will switch. So it will be a very fun way to test the capabilities and the response time, etc. So I guess 40, like 1 minute from now, we will have a confirmation message, and we will see the new contribution here. So I'll just stop the screen sharing when it's done, but yeah, the demo is over. That's it.
Thank you. That's really cool.
Yep. Hopefully, it looks like something that will benefit RDev very much, you know, since we don't really have a user interface for our crowdfunding right now. They'll have to look into that. Thank you. That's great.
Yep. I'll just wait 15 seconds, and if it takes too much time, then it's fine.
Yeah, you know, it makes me think it might be fun to do a reverse tip jar where you put tokens in the jar and it gives you a tip, like be quiet in the library, or, you know, don't take advice from strangers, things like that. That was a joke. Okay, I'll stick to my day job.
Okay, purchase successful. So I just hit OK. No jar message, no jar message. So I hit OK, and then it should be less than 10 seconds to see this. But yes, I also previously there was a field where you can add some additional text. So it could be fun that we could leave full messages with the contributions.
I just like the idea that the jar itself would be handing out tips, you know.
Okay.
I like that too. It's like a fortune cookie.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. The contribution appeared, and I just bought one token from Shixi's smart contract that is a fungible tokens contract. So yeah, that's it.
Very nice. Very nice.
I have also a question. What about Mark Solms?
I knew you were going to ask that. It is absolutely on my list of things to do. I've just been so busy, but it is on my list. I did, in fact, write to Lee Smolin yesterday. It was a similar kind of missive, although it wasn't about consciousness. It was about his book, Time Reborn. I don't know if many people here know who Lee Smolin is, but he is one of the co-inventors of loop quantum gravity. A co-founder of the Perimeter Institute up in Canada. And about 13 years ago, I was reading his book, The Trouble with Physics. And I noticed that on page 35, he made a false claim about knots. So I wrote to him and said, you know, what you wrote there isn't true. Maybe you meant this, or maybe you meant that, but what you wrote there is clearly not true. And he was so gracious. He wrote back to me immediately and said, thank you for the correction. I'll have it fixed in subsequent editions. So I haven't ever checked to see if that was the case, but in his recent book, Time Reborn, he takes on the very thorny problem of time in physics, and he makes a suggestion that time is real, you know, that it's not just an emergent phenomenon. And so I wrote to him because a lot of the tools in his toolbox are from an age ago, right? So in physics, the way the math is organized is you have particles, and all behavior comes about in terms of forces acting on particles. Even particle-particle interaction is in terms of forces acting on particles. And that's not how computation is organized, right? So if you look at the row calculus, it works very differently. You literally have states that interact with each other. So the math is fundamentally different. And so I offered to give a few talks at the Perimeter Institute in exchange for just some feedback on the space calculus. And I mentioned to him that I'd recently given a similar talk to Bob Kuka. And I don't know if people are following, but Bob and I are rapidly converging in public to, you know, a position that in fact quantum consensus is real and will eclipse classical consensus in a time period that's probably shorter than the life of Caspar. But anyway, so Bob had a position at Perimeter for a while. So Bob and Lee most likely know each other. So long-winded answer to your question about Mark Solms, but I did write to Lee, and I'm hoping to get on his radar, and that showed me that I at least have enough time to to craft these kinds of letters, so I can get the letter out to Mark Solms in the not too distant future. I had hoped to write it on the plane to Dubai, but the connection was so bad that I couldn't get it done on both legs of that trip. So
So you were contradicting him. You were saying that time and particles are emergent as opposed to his view.
No, it turns out that the if you look at the space calculus, which is what I believe I would show them, I can get located computation, and time is baked in terms of the evolution of the com rule. So it actually supports his position. Right? He has a position, but he doesn't have any math to say, well, how's he going to do it? He just it's like he just says, look, physics is wrong, and here's why. And it's actually a very powerful argument. You know, his argument is that when you try to take the way we do physics in a box, right? So physics of local systems, and you scale it up to cosmology, there are all these issues, there are all these problems. Like one basic problem is that in order for descriptions like that to have any experimental import, you have to be able to run them over and over and over again with different instances. But I mean, by definition, there's only one instance of the universe. So physics in a box doesn't scale up. But if you take into account that that all of these kinds of dynamical systems ought to be described in terms of some bifurcation of the state, like in row calculus, you bifurcate the state into, you know, a sending process and a receiving process, right? So like you get no evolution in the calculus, no behavior, unless the state can be cleaved into two. And that's also true of lambda, right? Lambda, you get no evolution of behavior unless your state can be cleaved into a function and its arguments. So this is just a fact of the way computation is organized, and it goes to, I mean, it goes to very fundamental issues in the mathematics, right? So classical mathematics, which was largely influenced by physics of the last several hundred years, you know, it's like ultimately this gets codified in category theory, where you have objects and you have morphisms. So the objects, like vector spaces or topological spaces or rings or groups or modules or blah, 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 right? They all just sit there. They don't do anything. Vectors don't have any behavior. They're a record of a state. And then the morphisms, like linear functions between vector spaces, that's where all the behavior gets recorded. So there's a kind of built-in assumption about how to model dynamics that goes to one of the more popular alternatives to the foundations of mathematics, aka category theory, right? But if you try to apply that viewpoint to the process calculi or to the lambda calculus or any of, you know, many very popular and very powerful computer science abstractions, it falls apart. And the reason is because the dynamics is wedded to the algebraic structure. So in lambda, you've got this algebraic structure, all the lambda expressions, and then you have a reduction rule that's a part of the lambda calculus. It's not on the side. It's not a morphism that's on the side. It's a part of the lambda calculus. And likewise with the pi calculus, it's the same thing. You've got an algebra, which is all, you know, all the pi terms, and then you've got an evolution rule, the com rule, which tells you how things behave. But that's a part of the pi calculus. It's not a morphism on the side. So if you're going to build a category of these things like the lambda calculus and the pi calculus and the blue calculus and the row calculus and the ambient calculus, well, if you're going to stuff them all in a category, then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the morphism between these different gadgets, between all these different calculi? Which means you have to ask yourself, well, what does the morphism preserve? And now you have a problem, because preserving behavior across all these different calculi is not easy. It is non-trivial. And it's not trivial even just to characterize how you would think about, you know, some abstract notion of behavioral preservation. So category theory is just a bad fit for all those calculi, at least from this perspective. So there's something fundamental, like very different about the way computer science thinks about the dynamics. This is a point I've been making for 20 years, right? But so far, the different intellectual disciplines are so siloed that they don't talk to each other and recognize this difference. But if physics were to stop for a moment and go, oh, maybe this way of carving up things into particles and forces doesn't match our intuition. Like in particular, at a minimum, you've got to carve up the universe into, the system and the clock. So that you can, or the system and your inertial reference frame, or things like that. So there is a bifurcation of state. It's just not explicit in the way the physics uses math. And so I think physics could learn a lot from computer science. So long-winded discussion. Sorry about that, but
isn't it that that universal logic has delay elements in it, which introduce time?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. All I'm saying is that the notion of behavior, like the way we think about representing dynamical systems in the math traditionally associated with, general relativity or quantum mechanics or the standard model, that all has a very specific flavor, right? You get forces acting on particles. That's basically it. I mean, there's a little bit of nuance when you start talking about general relativity, but at the end of the day, you're looking at this decomposition of the universe into two kinds of things: particles and forces. So again, there's a lot of nuance that I'm skating over, but and then that goes to the very heart of the organization of the mathematics. But that is not how the math works in computer science. It's not. The states are bifurcated. So a state in the lambda calculus is a lambda term. And that state is going to evolve, change to a new state, not by some outside force, but because there's a built-in rule as a part of lambda terms. They evolve in terms of beta reduction, and the same is true for the pi calculus. So a pi calculus state will evolve if you can carve it up into a sender and a receiver, and then you can run the com rule, right? So that notion of state and behavior mathematically looks very different. And the way you can show that it's very different is that when you try to categorify or give some categorical account of it, it isn't amenable to a nice, simple, easy categorical framework. So you have to work hard to represent these systems. So that's the point. And then time in these computational systems is basically the steps of reduction. It's the evolution. So you got a lambda term reduces from via beta reduction from one term to the next, and then from that next term to the next one after that, and so on and so forth. Right. So time is baked in. It's a part of beta reduction. Beta reduction tells you time. The com rule tells you time in pi or rho calculus. Right. So it literally lines up exactly with Smolin's ideas. So you'd think he'd want to investigate these tools, especially because, at the end of the day, there's this whole other thing that the math of physics just has ignored. which is when are two systems the same? What's the operational definition of when two systems are the same? Over in computer science, we have a beautiful notion. It's called bisimulation. And then you can connect bisimulation to types, and you can use those types to talk about substitutability. I can substitute this process for that process because in all contexts that are represented by this type, the only observable behaviors are captured by this type. And that's all connected to this basic set of conceptual tools and apparatus that's available in computer science and is nowhere to be found in the math of physics. So in particular, Curry-Howard gives us this deep connection between logic and types. Well, if I wanted to describe quantum states using some kind of logic, then bisimulation and spatial behavioral types would be ideal for talking about those kinds of things. And yet, nobody's doing it. So these are the kinds of things that I've been talking till I'm blue in the face about to anyone who will listen. Sorry to be so long-winded about this.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right, good folks, I've got a meeting in just a few minutes, so I'm going to dive off. Please stay safe, stay warm, and we will see you on the other side.